If you're interested in finally taking the mystery out of setting your calories for fat loss, today is your lucky day. Today's episode is all about setting the exact right number of calories to lose fat sustainably, so stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome to the Digital Barbell Podcast. I hope you are having a fantastic day. If this is your first time listening to our podcast or watching us on YouTube, welcome. You'll notice there's just one of us talking and just one of us standing here today. Don't worry, Blakely's totally fine, but I got the responsibilities today. We have a great episode for you today, getting into the specifics of setting your calorie goals for fat loss, a very hot topic. I wanted to answer a question that we got from one of our members the other day. It's not a Q&A episode, but I thought it was a really good common question. She asked, do protein goals matter as much on rest days or vacation weeks, or should I just focus on calories? We're all about balance here at Digital Barbell. So if you're on vacation, that's probably not the time to fixate on exactly how many grams of protein you are getting. Fall back on the habits that you know that support your macronutrient goals, like having protein at every meal. For ladies, somewhere in a palm-sized portion. For men, about 2 palm-sized portions of protein per meal. And then having a high protein snack during the day. If you prioritize that on vacation, you won't lose any progress and you'll be getting plenty of protein. Total calories is always priority number one for body composition, weight maintenance. But like I said, when you're on vacation, a week isn't going to make all the difference in the world. So put your priority on having fun on your vacation. As far as rest days go, yeah, you should try to hit your protein goal as much as you can during the week if you're at home. Remember, on rest days is when your body actually catches up with the recovery. The stuff we do in the gym is the stress. When we recover through sleep and eating proper nutrition, that's when we recover from our workouts and come back stronger. So hitting your protein goal is just as important on a rest day as it is a training day. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. We're talking all about finding how many calories is going to be right for you for fat loss. So let's dig right in. You're listening to this episode because you want to find out the best way to set your calorie deficit for fat loss. Since you already know that a calorie deficit is the only way to lose fat, I won't waste your valuable time trying to convince you of that fact. In this episode, I'll dig right into setting the calorie deficit for fat loss that's best for you. You ready? Let's go. The first and foremost step in setting your calories for fat loss is finding your total daily energy expenditure. We call this your TDEE for short. Your TDEE is the sum of all of the calories that it takes to maintain your current body weight at your current activity level. The wild thing about your TDEE is that it's unique to you and no one else. Let me explain why this matters for setting your calorie deficit with a little story. Tina and Tabitha were born in the same hospital on the same day. They lived on the same street, had the same hair color, and went to the same schools until the day they each left for college. Even stranger than that, they were the same height and weight. What wasn't the same was their genetics, their habits, their activity level, and their body compositions. Tina came from a family of athletes. Her dad played football in college, and her mom was a former gymnast. From the day she was able to walk, Tina was kicking a soccer ball. She made varsity her sophomore year and was the captain of the team by the time she was a junior. Every week, Tina lifted weights and trained with the team. At home, her family cooked most of their own food, and most of it came from the perimeter of the grocery store. Stuff like meat, vegetables, fruit, eggs, dairy, and plenty of foods like rice and potatoes. Tina was in great physical shape, and it showed. She was lean, had visible muscles, and looked athletic. She weighed about 140 pounds and had very little extra body fat. If Tina were to count how many calories she ate most days, it would be in the range of 2,500 to 2,700 just to maintain her weight at her activity level. That means her TDEE is about 2,600 calories per day. Tabitha's gift was less in the athletic arena and more in the math realm. She advanced to algebra before anyone in her middle school. She was an AP Trig by the time she was a sophomore, and she was the captain of the all-state mathlete team in her high school. Afternoons, nights, and weekends were mostly spent studying and solving equations in her room. Tabitha's mom was a single parent and the sole breadwinner for the family. With understandably little time to cook, a typical menu for the day was cereal for breakfast, a sandwich and chips for lunch, frozen pizza or spaghetti for dinner, and a couple Little Debbie type snacks mixed in during the day. Tabitha's lack of physical activity and years of eating the standard American diet resulted in a completely different body composition than Tina. Even though Tina and Tabitha both weighed 140 pounds, Tina was fit, trim, and covered in visible muscle tone. Tabitha, on the other hand, was soft, carried more body fat, and her waist was 6 inches bigger around than Tina's. If Tabitha were to calculate how many calories she ate most days, it would be around 1,800 to 2,000, which maintained her weight at about 140 pounds. That means her TDEE is about 1,900 calories per day. I told you that story to point out two main things. Number one, body composition is not the same thing as body weight. Tina and Tabitha both weigh 140 pounds, but look completely different. You're trying to use a calorie deficit to lose weight. I get it. But what you're really trying to do is lose fat. You want to look fit and athletic, not soft and fluffy. Instead of chasing a goal weight, chase the best body composition that you can achieve. Here's a spoiler. If you do things right with your training and your nutrition, which we want you to do, you'll probably weigh more than you think when you're at your ideal body composition. I'll link to our 2-part podcast series on body composition in the show notes to this episode. You can see from this example of Tina and Tabitha how your genetics, lifestyle, food choices, and training have a massive effect on your weight, your body composition, and therefore your calorie needs, or your TDEE. What I'm saying is nutrition is highly individual, and it's the reason that one-on-one nutrition coaching is so effective. Don't get discouraged by comparing yourself to what someone else eats in a day or by thinking that your metabolism is broken. It's not. Everyone can lose fat and improve their body composition, I promise. So let's talk about finding your TDEE. I'm going to give you 2 ways to find yours, which will then open the door to you setting your individualized calorie deficit for fat loss. The fastest way is to use your fingers and Google the Mifflin-St. Jeor formula. That's Jeor. This is a widely accepted formula to determine the biggest part of your TDEE, which is called your basal metabolic rate, or your BMR. Your BMR is based on your sex, your age, your height, and your weight. From there, we need to add in some calories to account for your activity level. Remember the difference between Tina and Tabitha? We do that through an activity multiplier. You're going to take your BMR and then multiply it by one of these that fits you the best. Are you sedentary like Tabitha? Multiply your BMR times 1.2. Do you do light exercise 1 to 3 times a week? Take your BMR, multiply times 1.375. Do you do moderate exercise 3 to 5 times a week? You'll use 1.55. Are you very active and work out 6 or 7 times a week? Use your BMR times 1.725. Are you an athlete who exercises 2 times per day like Tina? BMR times 1.9. Okay, warning here. Most people overestimate how active they are and how intensely they exercise. When in doubt, be conservative in your estimation when using one of those activity multipliers. You are not Michael Phelps or Serena Williams. Sorry to break it to you. The number you came up with after you use your activity multiplier is your estimated TDEE. Easy enough, right? For some people, this number really is good enough, and it's certainly a starting point for anybody. But there are drawbacks and limitations to this method. It doesn't know much about you. It doesn't know your previous experience with dieting. It doesn't take into account how many calories you're eating now. It doesn't take into account your body fat percentage, genetics, and your habits. All of these things can have a massive impact on your TDEE. So while TDEE calculators are a convenient shortcut, they don't always tell the whole story. And we've learned from working with hundreds of people over the years that these calculators can routinely be off by 10 to 25%. Now let's talk about another way that's more accurate to find your TDEE that doesn't use a calculator but does require more effort on your part. The benefit of that extra effort is that simply this method is based on you, and so the results can be trusted more accurately. Here's what you need to do step by step. Number 1, get a digital food scale. They're $10, $15 on Amazon. Get a smartphone or a computer, you probably already have one of those, and download MyFitnessPal or go to myfitnesspal.com and set up an account. Okay, next, read our article on how to use MyFitnessPal. I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. Step 4, weigh yourself first thing in the morning and record it in MyFitnessPal or somewhere else. Number 5, and this is important, without changing your diet, accurately log everything you eat and drink in the app for 5 to 7 days. The point is to find out how many calories you're eating now. If you're feeling guilty about what you eat or the different choices that you make and you choose not to log a few handfuls of candy or whatever that you normally eat in the day, you're not going to get an accurate estimation of your TDE. So I encourage you to be honest and accurate during this time. Number 6, maintain your normal physical activity and exercise during these days too. Don't do this when you're sick or when you're going to start running 5 miles a day or anything crazy like that. Just keep doing what you've been doing. Okay, step 7. After 5 to 7 days of logging your food, take your body weight again and record it. Add up the total number of calories that you ate all week and divide it by the number of days that you logged. For example, if you logged for 5 days and ate a total of 10,000 calories, your average daily calories were 2,000. Assuming that your body weight stayed about the same, plus or minus a pound, and you did an honest and accurate job of logging your food, you now have a really accurate estimate of your TDEE. Since this is based on an average, the more days you log, the better your estimate will be. If you weigh yourself at the end of your food logging days and you've gained or lost a bunch of weight, like 2 to 5 pounds, I would recommend trying again. I mean, what else you got to do? You're going to be eating anyway, right? Okay. By doing what you just did, you now have a really good idea of what your TDE is. Now for the fun part, the part you've been waiting for, the part where you start losing body fat and getting into a calorie deficit. We're going to create that deficit by setting your calorie goal at a number lower than your TDEE. As you stick with eating in a calorie deficit, your body will have no choice but to burn your body fat for energy. Remember, it's missing that energy from the deficit. That's good news, right? It's commonly accepted that 1 pound of body fat has about 3,500 calories worth of energy in it. What that means is that for every 3,500 calories of deficit you create and stick with consistently, you'll lose 1 pound of body fat. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but your body isn't as controlled and exact as an experiment in a lab. Your weight fluctuates wildly during the week because of a lot of different factors like water retention, sodium, hydration levels, changing activity levels, menstruation, rest, and recovery. Not to mention the contents of your actual digestive tract. My point is that even though a pound of fat has 3,500 calories in it, you might not lose exactly 1 pound for every 3,500 calories that you cut. Don't get discouraged and give up if that's the case. You really have the freedom to create as large of a calorie deficit as you want when you lose fat. But after helping over 300 people lose a lot of fat, I want to use that experience to set you up for success. Many people jump straight to the goal of trying to lose 1 pound per week. It's a nice round number that people just tend to gravitate towards. So to do that, they need to cut 3,500 calories per week or 500 calories per day right off the top of their TDEE. This could be a recipe for disaster, so keep listening. The number one thing that will derail your fat loss progress is a lack of consistency in sticking with your calories or, quote, falling off of your diet altogether for weeks or days at a time. Guess what's highly likely to lead to both of those things happening? Being hangry. Don't get me wrong. Hunger is a normal part of fat loss. It's going to happen. But as the size of your calorie deficit grows, so will your hunger. Your body doesn't want you to lose weight, and it's not afraid to use hunger to try to stop you. If you're a 250-pound man or a 200-pound woman and you cut 500 calories right off the top of your diet, you might be okay since you started with a fairly high TDEE. You're still eating a lot of food after all. But if you're a 150-pound woman with a TDEE of 1,800 calories or a 185-pound man at about 2,000, and you're trying to lose fat by cutting 500 calories per day, that's going to catch up with you quickly. Even your shoe is going to start looking like a delicious snack after just a couple days. So instead of just using a blanket policy like cut 500 calories per day to create your calorie deficit for fat loss, here's what to do instead. If you're trying to lose fat as fast as possible in a somewhat sustainable way, you're super committed, you have a healthy relationship with food, and you can tolerate moderate amounts of hunger, here's what to do. Take your TDEE from earlier and multiply it times 0.2. You just created a 20% calorie deficit, and this is your new calorie goal while you're losing fat. Now, let me say something before I go any further. If you fell asleep, wake up. You don't have to hit your calories exactly every day. That's a load off, right? For starters, the calorie count on food labels can be off by as much as 20%. So even if you do hit your calories exactly, who's to say it's actually right? Secondly, missing your calories by 10, 20, or 30 calories is not going to be the difference maker between you losing weight or not, I promise. Your body is simply not that precise. With our clients, we help them get within about 50 to 100 calories of their goal each day because that is close enough to make amazing progress. Okay, so if you choose to use 20% as your calorie deficit for fat loss, you should be ready to endure a little bit of hunger, as well as some decreased energy and motivation after you've been consistent for a few weeks. Your body wants to preserve body fat, and it will do that by decreasing your unconscious activity and ramping up your hunger. A good strategy we take with an aggressive diet is to plan for periodic increases in calories every 4 weeks to give you a mental and physical break from the deficit. These aren't cheat meals or cheat days. They are planned days of eating 200 to 500 calories more, done on purpose and still tracked in your food log. But for 90% of our fat loss clients, we use a more conservative calorie deficit. A conservative deficit is, number one, easier to stick with consistently, which is the number one way to get the best results possible. You'll be less hungry, suffer fewer negative consequences like decreased mood and energy. Your performance in the gym won't take a hit, and your friends and family won't have to listen to you whine so much about being hungry. So to set your conservative calorie deficit for fat loss, take your TDEE and multiply it times 0.85. You just set a 15% calorie deficit, and the number you got is your new calorie goal while you're losing weight. Now you might be wondering, well, what about other size deficits like 5% or 10%? Good question. After working with a ton of people, we wouldn't recommend really small deficits like 5 or 10% for fat loss. I mentioned earlier that food labels can be off by as much as 20%. It's also tough to estimate how many calories are in recipes and food that you get at restaurants or over at your friend's house. So if your calorie deficit is too small, there's a good chance that just all those little inconsistencies I mentioned could just wipe out your deficit altogether. You'll be doing all the work, but not losing any weight. That sounds pretty depressing. The other reason we don't recommend a super small calorie deficit is that your body might just slow down your metabolism by making you subconsciously move less. Let's say your 5% calorie deficit is only 125 calories. Your body may just make you fidget a little bit less, like 125 calories less worth over the course of a day, which would completely wipe out your deficit. Your calorie deficit needs to be large enough to give you some wiggle room for errors in logging and large enough to outpace your body's natural ability to decrease your subconscious activity in an effort to slow down your calorie burn. In our opinion, a 15% calorie deficit is the sweet spot for most people. Okay, congratulations. You just set your calorie deficit for fat loss. So now that you're eating in a calorie deficit consistently, it's time to make sure it's working. Let's talk about monitoring your progress. Here are the 3 ways you're going to know if your calorie deficit is working. Number 1, your weight. A lot of people get discouraged and give up on their diet because they think they aren't losing weight. They'll hop on the scale every Friday and see that the number isn't all that different from last Friday, and they'll think they're not able to lose weight, so they just give up. Remember earlier when I mentioned that your weight fluctuates like a lot from day to day? Those fluctuations can easily be 1 to 5 pounds, and that's completely normal. What if you had a big meal or a salty entree on Thursday night that made you retain a bunch of water and make your weight spike up a couple pounds? If you only weigh yourself once a week, you're going to be missing the big picture and risk wanting to give up. So do this instead. Weigh yourself every morning at the same time wearing just your skivvies. At the end of the week, add up all 7 of those daily weights and divide by 7. This is your average weight for the week, and it's much more reliable to compare your weekly averages to truly see if you're making progress or not. Okay, number 2, body measurements. Get yourself a flexible tape measure and take notes. You're going to measure your waist circumference 1 inch above your belly button. And then you're going to measure your hips at the widest part around the back of your butt. Not that you have a butt anywhere else but in the back. Last but not least, take progress photos. I know, you're self-conscious and you don't want to take photos. Do it anyway. You will be so glad when you look like a superhero. What you want to do is set up your phone in a windowsill and take front, back, and side profile pictures so that you can compare them from month to month. Trust us. Use an app like PhotoGrid on your phone so you can put those pictures exactly side by side. Don't just rely on swiping through your phone. You will not be able to get a true measure of your progress. Okay, I really hope you found this episode helpful. If you want to dig in even deeper, I will link to another article that I wrote on this topic and put it in the show notes. If you're struggling to reach your health and fitness goals, we really can help you. We can help you put this whole process on autopilot with a digital barbell coach by your side. No more spinning your wheels, wondering what to do, going through the motions. You can apply for one-on-one coaching with us in the description of this episode too. Or if you just have any questions, feel free to reach out. Email me at jonathan@digitalbarbell.com. Have a great day.